Welcome, folks, to How to Build a High Performance Team. This is a Medcan Presents webinar. My name is Christopher Shulgin. I'm part of the team who create content here at Medcan. Our guest today is Scott Kress from Summit Team Building. Scott Kress is an expedition leader. He's a founder. He's a mountaineer and leadership trainer. An expert in climbing in extreme conditions, Scott has summited Everest, traveled to both poles, and led many expeditions through the Himalayas. Through these high-intensity experiences, Scott has gained valuable insight into what it takes to be a leader and how to help a team reach peak performance. Off the mountain, Scott has 2 undergraduate degrees, a master's in leadership and training, and has taught at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. Scott, how are you today?
Hey, Chris, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. This is great. So the reason that we're talking, the reason that team building is such a issue today is that most people or many offices have gone hybrid. We were talking to a client who worked with Spotify, and they said Spotify is completely virtual, and actually one of their contacts is working from Fernie, BC, which sounds amazing. One of my favorite places. But can you talk about that, about how things have changed over the course of for team building, and how, it used to be that, you would be working in an office and team building would actually be a relatively easy thing, but now, things are completely different.
Yeah, well, when we look at team building, and we'll talk about this a little bit further on, you've got the informal team building, which is just taking place in the office. People connecting with each other, talking around the water cooler, having conversations before the meetings, going out for lunch, grabbing a coffee together. All these social interactions are all part of team building. And those are the things that we have lost through the pandemic when everybody switched to virtual. Most businesses are still virtual. There's a few that have started to go back in person, but most are still conducting day-to-day business in a virtual environment. We are starting to see a return to in-person conferences, meetings, offsites, giving an opportunity for people who haven't been together for the last 18, 19 months to be able to get together in person and not only go over the business content that they need to review, but for large part, it's about socializing. It's about reconnecting with people. And there's been so many new hires during the pandemic that they've never even met face-to-face before. Mm-hmm. And it's so I've been with a few groups recently, really just in September. We started doing in-person programs again. We've had quite a busy September, October with in-person training and team building programs. And there's been several companies who are not there doing any business content at all. Generally, they're doing business content, from 9 o'clock until 3 o'clock, and then we'll do some team building from 3 till 5, something like that. But there's been many companies who are doing no business content at all. They're just there to reconnect, to socialize, to have dinners together, to go out on a hike together, to go on a walk together, to play games together. And so you are getting this, what used to take place in the workplace, this more informal team building, they're now having to do this in an offsite environment. Plus they're adding in the more of the formal team building, which is what we can add, whether it's looking at communication or building trust, or whether it's just having some fun team building activities at the same time.
So the premise of team building is to encourage the formation of groups who know and trust one another so that they can work together effectively when crisis situations arise. Creating this kind of like this shared culture is something that I think goes back hundreds of years. It comes out of the military. And you were, I think, you participated in one of the key businesses to come out of the team building early with Outward Bound, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was involved in Outward Bound out of university, actually during university, and then right out of university. And that was my first exposure to the world of, using experiential learning to help in personal development and into professional development. Started out more on the youth side of things, on the personal development, but then started to access into the corporate development programs, which Outward Bound was really the founder of the modern day corporate team building movement. And they were the ones who pioneered this use of experiential learning to really help people connect more effectively, to build relationship and trust and communication. And that then translates over into the workplace, not only in crisis situations, but in everyday situations. You are more likely to give somebody a call, send them an email, ask them a question if you have built a relationship. You're more likely to ask those difficult questions. You're more likely to give people that critical feedback when you have those relationships. And those are things that those things have suffered over this pandemic, because it's just not the same in a virtual environment. And we need to rebuild that in an in-person environment. Plus all those, as we mentioned, all those people who've joined the company during the pandemic, you've never even had a chance to build a relationship with those people. And so this is why team building is so important right now, as companies are emerging from this virtual environment and starting to reconnect in an in-person setting.
I love this quote from you. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a team. Although I do wonder about it in the context of, when a team is in person, it can act. And I mean, this is certainly true for my own experience with my own teams, that when we're together, we're very fast, we're moving quickly. And then when we're kind of hybrid, things are slower, even with Slack, even with Zoom, even with, all Google Meet and all the various things. And so you almost need these kind of shared bonds to mitigate that a little bit, or to correct that. Yeah.
And I can't take credit for this quote. It is a really great and meaningful quote, but it's not mine. It's been around for quite some time. I don't know the exact source of it.
Okay.
But yeah, if you want to go far, you go as a team. Sure, there's complexities as a team. Things are more challenging as a team because you have different opinions and different ways of doing things, and different people work at different speeds and make decisions in different ways. But ultimately, you have a much stronger end product because of that diversity. So it's adding in the team that will help you to get those better results in the long run.
So I want to talk a little bit, because this is how Medcan first became interested in the whole idea of team building, is that demand for mental wellness services, for mental health services, really skyrocketed over the course of the pandemic. And part of the reason that it did, the theory goes, is that people weren't experiencing the strong human bonds with loved ones, but also with coworkers that existed. And so it's really interesting. You can tell yourself that, you can work from home and be connected to your coworkers, but actually you really you need this kind of emotional connection to feel like you're part of a team. So one of the most important predictors of mental and physical health is social connection. The extent that a human being exists within a web of close and positively experienced relationships with others, which, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because you have experience with teams that worked and teams that didn't, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, there's so much of our world, personal and professional, that's all built on relationships. We all have slightly different social interaction needs. Some people have more, some people have less, but we are social beings and we need to have that connection with people in an in-person environment. The virtual environment does, it will mimic it to a certain extent, but it's not going to replace it by any means. And there are people who, sure, there's definitely some advantages to working from home in this virtual setting. There's, different things that you can take from that, but you are missing that in-person connection with people. And there is that disconnect. You don't have that same, communication and collaboration environment that you have. And people studies have shown that people are much more individualistic in a virtual environment. There's not as much collaboration going on. They're not asking as many questions. They're really just kind of sitting in their own cocoon in their basement office and doing what they need to do. And businesses have been making it through this, but there's a lot left on the table, a lot of opportunities that aren't being accessed at this point. And so this is where we need to build in that in-person environment. And the businesses are going to change. Some businesses are going to go back to in-person. Some are going to go to a hybrid where you can work part-time in the office, part-time virtually. And some businesses are going to stay virtual. Regardless of what model your business takes, you need to help people to have opportunities to connect in person, whether that's in the office or whether it's in an off-site type of an environment. It's really important for people to have that. I always say that relationship is the foundation of any high performance team. We don't do things for each other because we have to. We do things for each other because we want to. And it's based on those relationships. And we need to foster an environment where people can have that.
Fantastic. So the question is how to create a high performance team in an age of limited physical proximity. Which I think we'll talk about for the kind of the rest of this. There's no need to be best friends with everyone at the office. I think this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is you. There is no need to be best friends with everyone at the office, but there is a need to have a relationship where you can know and understand each other. So these are your tips. Do you want to talk about how you suggest and how you work with companies to create those team bonds?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we'll do with a company is to help them first understand what is a high performance team from a theoretical perspective, looking at research and what has been proven to be important to people, but then also from an experiential perspective, we'll engage people in different challenges that will highlight those really positive behaviors and those behaviors that are maybe not as positive. So we'll start off with giving them this kind of hands-on emotional understanding of what is a high performance team. Then we need to look at developing a vision of what is high performance for them. There is no one universal definition of a high performance team. There's a lot of commonalities, but every team is a little bit different based on their team makeup, based on their product or service, based on their values, their norms, all these different things. So you want each team to craft their own vision statement. And I'm not talking about your organizational vision, about your product, your service, your financial goals, any of that. I'm just talking about your culture vision, your people vision. We always say that you can't expect anybody to live up to your expectations unless they know what those expectations are. And so your vision provides a blueprint for your culture. Who do you want to be? What's important to you? What are your values? What are your norms? How do you interact together as a team? And that's kind of the first place to start, is to figure out what is your definition of your culture in its best state.
Gotcha. So the importance of leadership, I think, underscores a lot of what you talk about, and not just leaders who, you want to do more than walk the walk. You need to run the talk, which is such a great line, I think. So can you talk about that a little bit and the importance of leadership to the overall team?
Yeah, studies have shown that teams will take on the behaviors, the values, the actions, the priorities of their leader within 5 days of that relationship beginning. I've seen it happen within 24 hours. So teams in many respects are a reflection of their leader. You can have an overarching organizational culture in a big company, but then every department is going to be slightly different. Every team is going to be slightly different. And that's going to be a reflection of the team members, but also the team leader. That leader has a disproportionate influence over what the team culture becomes. So when you look at the team, and if you are not happy with the team, you need to be reflective and think, what have I as a leader done that has contributed to this culture? And so as a leader, you're starting with that vision. what is it that we want to, who do we want to be, what's important to us, and then nobody is going to live it unless the leader is living it. And the thing is, team members generally will not take it quite to the same extent as the leader. So the old saying, you got to walk the talk, is right on, except as a leader, I think you got to take it further. You have to run the talk, because people aren't going to take, they're not going to put the same priority or the same level of importance on something as you might, as the team head or the team leader or the CEO or whatever it happens to be. So you need to really be obvious in what you're wanting to promote, and really demonstrate it so that people will see how important it is, and they will take on those characteristics and behaviors as well. Probably not quite to the same extent as the leader. So that's why you have to, take it a little bit farther, so that when the team members do it, it's coming up to the place where you want it to be.
So the third tip is about real world opportunities for social cohesion. So a little bit, this is formal team building events, but it's also informal shared experiences like dinners and lunches that see teams gathering together. One thing I would love to hear from you is how, when one of your climbing expeditions comes together, like what's the first thing that you guys, that you folks, because it's men and women, that you folks do to try to get to that kind of cultural team makeup as soon as possible? Because I imagine by now, you've been doing this for years. I imagine you have it down to a science.
Yeah. So when you want to start before you get into the heart of the expedition. That's when, when you've got the pressure and the environment to deal with, you don't want to really be focusing on team building at that point. So ultimately you want to do it before that. So before any expedition, we are getting together. First of all, getting together with teams in just a social environment. Let's go for a drink. Let's go for dinner and start to get to know people. Having some facilitated conversations that will encourage people to share, to talk, to help us to learn things about each other that, maybe at a little bit more of an accelerated pace, perhaps. And then we'll start engaging people in technical training. How do you put up a tent? How do you put on a harness? How do you use crampons? How do you do these things in a high wind environment? So we're engaging in these technical training experiences, but those are also team building experiences at the same time, because it's a shared experience. We are learning about each other. We're bonding together in a challenging environment. And so we'll continue to do these things, and then we'll add in some conversations. We do exactly what we do with the corporate environment, we do in an expedition environment. What is our vision for our team? What do we want to get from this expedition? What are your priorities? What do you want to be your takeaways? And we'll craft a vision, a culture vision of who we want to be as a team. We'll develop some team norms and talk about code of conduct, and how are we going to deal with stress? How are we going to deal with pressure? How are we going to deal with conflict? How are we going to deal with change? You have to have an idea of how you're going to deal with these situations before they occur. So, and we can't cover absolutely everything. You're never going to think about everything, but you can cover the major buckets, so that when things change, when stress happens, when a critical environment happens, you've got an understanding as a team as to how you're going to get through it, how you're going to work together to resolve the challenge. So there's a lot of pre-expedition prep that goes into this. And it's exactly the same thing that we do with a corporate environment. Now, as a corporate team, you're already working together, and you have this offsite, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever. But it's during that offsite is when you want to re-examine your vision, your culture vision as a team, your norms, your code of conduct. You want to be looking at building trust and communication, so that when you have those difficult conversations, when things change at the moment's notice in the workplace, you can deal with it more effectively. So, we often talk about sports teams, and sports teams will spend about 98% of their time practicing and 2% of the time actually performing. Business teams are the exact opposite. 2% of the time they get to practice, if they're lucky, and 98% of time they have to be practicing. So when you do have this opportunity to have an in-person offsite, you don't want to spend the entire time staring at Excel sheets and PowerPoints. You want to be using that time to really put more concrete on the foundation of your team. So that, because that's the very few opportunities that you do have to practice. And so you want to take advantage of that practice opportunity to really help your team to understand, from a sports terminology, all the different plays that you need to work out so that you can then perform effectively when you're playing your game back in the office.
It's pretty interesting when you look at the dichotomy, the 2% practicing, 98% performing versus 98% practicing and 2% performing for sports teams. So let's say I am a business leader and my team is hybrid. So some of them are geographically disparate, and I have had you or some other team building function already, but in between, so for the 11 months in between, surely there are things that I should be doing, and the things that I should be doing are more, I imagine, than just a dinner out. Although probably a dinner out for a small team is like something that should happen regularly, but the undercurrent on these team building events seems to be some sort of it's not exactly stressful, but it's memorable, some sort of a memorable shared experience that then creates this common bond. Oh, we lived through that, that encourages a team ethic or a team ethos afterward. Should there also be something happening like every 6 weeks or something to perpetuate that team ethos?
Well, in an ideal environment, maybe it's once a quarter you're having something that is more of a formal training or team building event, and that could be something, generally speaking, with an outside a third party provider. But you want to have frequently those like the team lunches, the team dinners, maybe once a quarter, do something like that as well. But as a leader, you want to be reinforcing the culture at every opportunity that you have. So when we do a training session with a client, one of the things that we give to the team leader afterwards is what we call our follow-up document. And this is a document that contains a whole bunch of suggestions of things that they can do back in the workplace to keep the momentum going that was created in this offsite training or offsite team building. So when you have your Monday morning meetings, maybe you spend 10 minutes reviewing your team vision, talking about one of the team priorities that you have, asking for suggestions around team building, asking for people to identify areas that need some attention, need some focus. So you want to be mentioning it to the team on a fairly regular basis. In one way or another, maybe once a week, you are talking to the team about culture, the importance of culture, and the elements that you want to have present within culture. This is where you get, posters in the office, you get team shirts, you get hats, different things to just really help to foster that team environment. And so in between that once a year or twice a year offsite, you want to be continuing to focus on promoting a healthy team culture, formally and formally, whenever you have the opportunity to do so. That's
great. Okay. Folks, so if there are questions, you can ask questions based on the Q&A function, or you can ask through the chat function. I'm just going to continue, and I'll triage them as they come in. Scott, can you talk about best practices at companies that you've encountered? Are there, I'm thinking of more organic experiences that were sort of bottom up or that just kind of arose. What are some of the most interesting team building procedures that you've experienced over the years?
Well, some of the ones that I've seen that people have really kind of latched onto are those kind of team-driven community give back events. People will, companies, teams, more like teams, will get together for a cause. Somebody within the team has got a passion around a specific cause. They enlist a few of their teammates to help out in something, and it starts to snowball. So I've seen many teams that have got involved in things, and these are not driven by the organization. These are driven by the team and a couple of individuals within the team, and these are team building opportunities. They might not see them as being team building opportunities, and that's not the reason why they're doing them, but they definitely are those team building opportunities. So as you as a team member see an opportunity to get people connected in a way through different types of activities or objectives, then that's going to be beneficial to the team in not just the relationship side, but also in the productivity side. In the end, those are those informal team building experiences that we have. I've seen teams that will go out, go on a hike together. They go on afternoon walks together. There's all kinds of different things that you can do that are not formal team building, that is not promoted by the organization, but that have just happened because you've got a few people within a team that have an idea, and they want to get the team involved in it. So there's lots of different strategies that people have used that I've seen.
It's one thing, I just finished reading the book Alpha, which is about a SEAL team that goes to Iraq, and then the leadership of the team breaks down, and the team, I won't give it away, but terrible things happen in Iraq to the team, and then they come back and eventually they prosecute the leader of this SEAL team Alpha. And it struck me as a really interesting failure of team building in a situation that is supposed to be amazing at it. And one thing that comes through in the book is the way that people don't necessarily work or make sacrifices for the leader. They make sacrifices for each other, for the shared bonds that are within the team. They're doing it like for their friends who are within the team. And I'm wondering, how do you, like, when your team is hybrid, how do you encourage these kind of informal friendships to happen that should be happening, without the guidance necessarily of the leader? So do you know what I mean? So basically, these are relationships. These are not top-down relationships where it's leader to team member. It's team member to team member. And it's those relationships, I think, that are motivating a lot of the work and are mitigating a lot of the stress, so that you have somebody, if your leader yells at you or something, I don't think that happens very much, but if there's some sort of a traumatic event where you get criticized, then you have somebody to turn to say, to talk about it and to kind of vent about it. So my question is, how do you encourage those informal friendships to happen on a team?
Yeah, in a virtual environment, it's tough. There's no question about it. It's tough. Those of us who were lucky enough to know each other before everything turned virtual have got that, in-person foundation to fall back on. Those of us who have only got to know each other during a virtual environment, have never met in person, have never had any socialization together, it's much, much more difficult. So as a leader, you do want to encourage those relationships to develop. And that's where you can do some virtual based team building, both formally and informally. You can hire a team building company who will do something in a virtual setting for you. You can also have a team meeting, a virtual meeting that is not business content driven. It's just about socializing. How you can eat lunch together, even though you're not in person. people can have lunch together. So as a leader, you want to provide opportunities where people can build those social relationships in a virtual environment. And
it's interesting. It's almost like you have to create these it's almost like informal. Somehow you have to encourage informal, lunch dates among team members that don't involve that don't if somebody's in Fernie, for example, and somebody's in Gatineau, let's say, on your team, you're a team of lawyers or something, then maybe it's a shared lunch that happens over Zoom, but you just kind of are there and you're talking. I mean, some sort of it's an interesting challenge, these things.
Yeah, and as a leader, you need to recognize that that is a challenge, and that is something that's important for you to focus on as a leader, and you need to make it happen. And sure, we're all busy. We got tons of stuff to do. You got lists, you've got deadlines, but you need to work into your schedule time for people to connect personally, because that will benefit all the other business elements that you have to deal with.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So in terms of your business, is there something that you're looking forward to or looking ahead? Like, do you see, first of all, do you see hybrid teams lasting? And then is there some sort of a event down the road that you're seeing that, that life will get back to normal in terms of, maybe more of an in-person office environment?
Yeah, if I had a crystal ball, nobody can predict what's going to happen. It's changing so frequently, but the direction that I see us moving is the hybrid is here to stay. There's going to be some teams that will move back to 100% in person, but I think they're going to be in the minority. The majority of teams are going to have some type of a hybrid work environment where people will spend some time in the office and some time in a virtual setting. I think that's probably where a lot of companies are headed to right now. So leaders are going to have to take that into consideration, because leading a purely in-person team is one thing, leading a purely virtual team is one thing, but leading a hybrid is completely different. And you need to be looking at all kinds of different factors for helping your teams to interact effectively when they're in that hybrid setting. Certainly as what we used to think of as normal is not going to exist anymore. We're going to have a new normal, whatever that new normal is going to be. And it's going to take a couple of years to shake out before we kind of see what happens after this, because there's still going to be a lot of hangover from the pandemic, even after it has been called to an end. And I don't know exactly what the medical terminology is to when you say the pandemic has passed, but it's going to take a while for people to get past that. And so we're going to be going through this for at least a couple more years, trying to sort out how do we work together, how do we build effective teams in this constantly changing work environment. And so leaders, again, have to really be on their game. They have to be watching, listening, observing, and knowing what do I do to help my team. We go back to Stephen Covey, who once said that the front line produces the bottom line. So in saying that, the leader's job is to do everything in their power to make the team as successful as possible. And, looking at how do you help them to connect and collaborate and deal with stress and deal with conflict, all these different pieces. That's what certainly a leader is looking at. Strategy, they're looking at vision, they're looking at budgeting, all those different things. But a leader's huge job is orchestrating the team in such a way that they can do what they need to do in a highly effective way.
So to wrap up, we talked about in the green room, so to speak, we were talking about how you are headed off and how much you love in-person team building events and how those are, they're back, they're happening, they're back. and it's this important complement to the hybrid workforce, that there's the team building event, and then these are happening. That's really exciting to hear. So to talk about how to enlist your services, so summitteambuilding.com is your website. team@summitbuilding.com is your email. Do you want to talk at all about maybe how or what what happens when you first hear somebody who's interested in getting a team building event?
Yeah, of course. Generally, companies are contacting us because they've got a need in building their team in one way or another. And so we'll go through a conversation to learn a little bit about their business, their environment, their challenges, their successes, where they're looking at heading in the future. And then what are they looking for from a team building event? And we can break it down into training, which is more about the learning content. We're looking at change management, conflict communication styles, leadership styles, these types of things, kind of content driven learning programs. And then there's the team building, the fun stuff, the team events and activities that are lighter on the learning side, but have a much stronger focus on relationship development, team bonding. So we want to get an idea of, what are you looking for as a team, as a company, what's going to give you the best return on investment. And then we can put together some ideas of what is going to be the best thing for you to access during your, that limited practice time that you have. How are you going to get the best return on that limited amount of time that you have to practice as a team? And, we'll look at all kinds of different options, some that are indoor, some that are outdoor, some that are classroom based, some that are very active, some that are more interactive. There's all kinds of different ways that you can look at training and development and team building for a company. And, that's what we've been doing for over 20 years now, to help you discover what is the best strategy for your team to help you reach your goals.
Perfect. Okay. That was amazing. And I can only think that you will, that you're heading into a boom time for team building. I just think the need for the services are so strong and so striking that that's got to be an exciting period for you.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It is. It's trending in that direction. There's still a lot of hesitancy out there. People are, not as many people are comfortable meeting in person, but it's warming up, and there is definitely a need. So I think it's going to take a little while to ramp up, but I do see it as being, a pretty important element that's going to become quite more popular than perhaps it has been in the past, because of such a strong need as we emerge more from the pandemic and people become more comfortable meeting in an in-person environment.
Fantastic. Okay, future webinars. So Tuesday, December 7 at 12:30 p.m. we have Medcan presents the review, the year in review. What changed in 2021 and what's to come in 2022? What preventive health developments did you miss over the last 12 months? And what exciting changes are coming in the next 12? In this complimentary webinar, Medcan experts provide their picks on how the guidance changed over the last year and what they're anticipating in the months to come. And you can sign up for that at medcan.com/listen, watch, and learn, which is just off the main page of Medcan. Scott, Kress, thank you so much for this. We'll put this up on YouTube at the Medcan LiveWell site. That's youtube.com/Medcan LiveWell. Scott, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who participated. Goodbye, folks. Until December.